Naomi Parker was 28 years old when the past reached out and knocked the air from her lungs. Before I continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. Your one click really helps support the channel. The certified letter arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind that required a signature and carried an unspoken warning. She had buried Ruth Parker, the only mother she had ever known, just 3 weeks earlier. Grief was still fresh, still heavy, still sitting in her chest like wet cement. Ruth had raised Naomi from the moment she was 3 days old, taking her home from the hospital and never once letting go. The funeral had been small and intimate, exactly as Ruth had requested, filled with people who loved her quietly and deeply. Naomi tore open the envelope expecting another condolence notice or a lingering hospice bill. Instead, she found a legal summons. Her biological mother, Lydia Monroe, a woman Naomi had never met, was suing her for $2.5 million. Half of the inheritance Ruth had left behind. Half of a life's work. Naomi read the document twice, then a third time, her hands shaking as the words blurred together. Claims of biological connection. Allegations of emotional harm. Demands dressed up as legal language. Lydia Monroe had been absent for 28 years. Now she wanted money. The memory Ruth had shared years ago came rushing back, sharp and unwanted. Lydia Monroe had signed the adoption papers at the hospital, handed Naomi over, and walked away without looking back. Ruth had told the story once, her voice tight, her hand steady as it stroked Naomi's hair. She said she had dreams, Ruth had said quietly. Dreams that didn't include you. Naomi had believed that chapter was long closed. Yet here it was again, dressed in legal stationery and entitlement. Naomi called her best friend, Brianna Cole, barely waiting for the greeting. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. Brianna's voice shifted instantly. When Naomi explained, the line went silent. Then Brianna whispered, "She's suing you." Naomi didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, numbers filled the dark. $5 million. Ruth had built that wealth slowly, carefully, buying modest properties across Atlanta starting in the 1970s. She lived in the same small bankhead house for 50 years, drove an aging Honda until it refused to start, and never spoke about money as power. Generational stability, she called it. Naomi sat awake until dawn, realizing the generation Ruth built it for had never shared her blood. By sunrise, Naomi was seated at her kitchen table surrounded by old albums and documents Ruth had left behind. She found the adoption certificate finalized when she was 6 months old. Lydia's signature was rushed and barely legible. In the margin, a social worker's note read, "Birth mother declined visitation. Clean break requested." The words stung more than the lawsuit itself. Naomi uncovered a single photograph Ruth had kept, a young Lydia, no more than 19, laughing at something outside the frame. She looked carefree, untouched by consequence. Naomi's phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. "This is your mother. We need to talk before this gets ugly." Naomi blocked the number without replying. Brianna arrived soon after with coffee and breakfast, spreading papers across the table like strategy maps. Naomi admitted her savings were nearly gone. The estate was still locked in probate. Legal help would be expensive. Brianna's expression hardened. "Then we fight smart," she said. That afternoon, Naomi drove to Ruth's house. Her house now. The bungalow still smelled like cocoa butter and pine cleaner. Everything remained untouched, frozen in time. Naomi stepped into Ruth's sunroom office, where decades of careful records waited for answers Ruth had never spoken aloud. Naomi found the folder labeled Family, Personal tucked inside a filing cabinet. Inside were childhood relics, hospital bracelets, report cards, handmade cards from elementary school. Then she found the letters. 3 envelopes, all addressed to Ruth, all from Lydia Monroe, dated years apart. Naomi opened the first with trembling hands. Lydia wrote that she had made a mistake and wanted to see Naomi. The second letter carried threats, accusations, legal warnings. The third was cold and bitter, promising that blood would matter someday. Naomi's breath caught. Ruth had never mentioned these letters. A small handwritten note was attached to the last one. Lydia arrived intoxicated. Threatening. Restraining order filed. Keep for Naomi's safety. Naomi sat back, stunned. The story was deeper than abandonment. It was danger. The next morning, Naomi met attorney Michael Reeves in Buckhead. His office overlooked Peachtree Street, glass and steel rising confidently above traffic. He listened without interruption, reading the summons carefully. This lawsuit has no legal foundation, he said calmly. Lydia had terminated her parental rights. Georgia law was clear. Relief washed over Naomi until Michael explained the cost. Fighting even a baseless claim would take time, money, and emotional endurance. Lydia wasn't trying to win. She was trying to exhaust Naomi into surrender. Against legal advice, Naomi agreed to meet Lydia. They chose a Starbucks in Midtown, neutral ground. Naomi arrived early, hands wrapped around a cup she didn't drink. Lydia entered precisely on time. Recognition hit instantly. The same eyes. The same posture. But where Naomi carried softness shaped by care, Lydia's face was hardened by years of choices she wouldn't name. Lydia smiled too quickly, called Naomi beautiful, claimed resemblance. Naomi shut it down immediately. The conversation unraveled fast. Lydia spoke of being young, unsupported, abandoned herself. Then the truth surfaced, sharp and ugly. This wasn't about Naomi. It was about money Lydia believed she deserved. She claimed Ruth had stolen a future meant for her. Naomi realized something critical in that moment. She wasn't a daughter to Lydia. She was leverage. That night, Naomi returned to Ruth's office and found a second truth waiting. A death certificate. Ethan Parker, Ruth's son, had died in a car accident when Naomi was only weeks old. Her biological father had wanted to do right. He had never been given the chance. Naomi sat alone, the past rearranging itself piece by piece. What Lydia called theft, Ruth had called protection. And Naomi finally understood which story was real. The following days unfolded with ruthless efficiency. Naomi handed every document she had uncovered to Michael Reeves, who reviewed them with growing focus. Lydia's letters, the restraining order, the timeline of silence, all of it painted a picture far removed from the wounded mother Lydia claimed to be. This confirms motive, Michael said. She waited until Ruth passed because she assumed no one would contradict her story. Depositions were scheduled. Naomi felt the weight of it settling into her bones. Grief had barely loosened its grip, and now she was being dragged into courtrooms and conference rooms where her life would be dissected for profit. At night, Naomi lay awake thinking about Ruth's discipline, her patience, the quiet way she taught responsibility without ever asking for gratitude. Naomi realized that every choice Ruth made had been deliberate. Nothing about her silence had been accidental. Lydia had not been erased. She had been contained. When the first deposition date arrived, Naomi walked into Michael's office with Brianna beside her. Across the polished table sat Lydia and her attorney, Daniel Whitman. Lydia looked smaller than Naomi remembered from the cafe, but her eyes still carried calculation. Daniel spoke smoothly, framing Lydia as a woman denied a relationship she desperately wanted. Naomi listened, jaw tight, waiting. Lydia testified with practiced sadness. She described youth, fear, poverty, and sacrifice. She said placing Naomi for adoption had broken her heart. She claimed she had tried repeatedly to reconnect but had been blocked by Ruth. Naomi felt anger rise, but she stayed silent, watching Michael take notes. When Daniel asked when Lydia learned of Ruth's death, she answered without hesitation. "I saw the obituary," Lydia said. "It listed Naomi as sole heir." The room shifted. Michael leaned forward. "So you filed suit immediately afterward?" Lydia hesitated, then nodded. "I realized I had been cut out of everything." Naomi understood then that timing was the spine of the case. Lydia had not mourned Ruth. She had calculated loss. When Naomi finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. She listed moments Ruth had been present: illnesses, injuries, failures, celebrations. She did not exaggerate. She didn't need to. Lydia interrupted twice. Michael stopped her both times. The deposition ended with tension unresolved, but Naomi felt steadier walking out. That evening, her phone rang. An unfamiliar voice introduced herself as Elaine Monroe, Lydia's mother. Naomi froze, listening. Elaine asked for nothing. She said only, "You deserve the truth." Elaine lived near the airport in a modest apartment that showed signs of careful living. When Naomi arrived, Elaine greeted her with trembling hands and quiet eyes. Inside, photographs filled every surface. Naomi as a baby appeared once, tucked carefully among family pictures. Elaine explained slowly, choosing her words with care. Lydia had not been forced out. She had been unstable. Drugs, disappearances, chaos. Elaine had begged to help raise Naomi. Lydia had refused. She thought money could fix everything, Elaine said. She believed Ruth would pay her. When Ruth refused, Lydia left. Elaine opened a box filled with documents, arrest records, rehab orders, police reports. Then one final paper stopped Naomi cold. Another adoption. Lydia had given up a son 4 years after Naomi. Elaine had tried to adopt him herself but had been denied due to age. Naomi felt something inside her harden into clarity. This was not a story of regret. It was a pattern. That night, Naomi called Michael. He reviewed the evidence and smiled grimly. "This changes everything," he said. "We're filing a motion to dismiss and a countersuit." For the first time, Naomi felt protected, not by money, but by truth assembled carefully and without anger. The second deposition unfolded differently. Michael led this one. He asked Lydia if Naomi was her only child. Lydia answered yes without hesitation. Michael slid the adoption record across the table. Silence followed. Daniel Whitman's face tightened as he read. Lydia stammered, tried to explain, tried to minimize. Michael didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He introduced arrest records next. Then the restraining order. Lydia broke down, tears streaking her makeup. Naomi watched without satisfaction. What she felt instead was distance. When Naomi spoke, it was not to accuse, but to define boundaries. "You don't get to rewrite history," she said evenly. "You made choices. Ruth responded to protect me. That's the truth." The trial followed weeks later in a packed courtroom. Public interest grew, drawn to the spectacle of blood ties versus chosen family. Judge Eleanor Brooks listened without interruption. She asked precise questions. Lydia faltered under scrutiny. Her narrative collapsed under documentation. When Michael presented the countersuit, the judge's expression hardened. This was not grief-driven confusion. It was abuse of process. When the ruling came, it was swift and decisive. The judge dismissed Lydia's lawsuit with prejudice. She granted Naomi's countersuit in full, ordering Lydia to pay legal fees and damages. Lydia protested, claimed poverty. The judge was unmoved. "Then you should not have filed," she said. Months later, probate cleared. Naomi stood in Ruth's sunroom, sunlight spilling across old ledgers and framed photos. The estate was settled. The legacy intact. Lydia attempted contact once more. Naomi did not respond. Elaine, however, remained in Naomi's life, a quiet connection built on honesty, not obligation. Naomi funded a scholarship in Ruth's name for foster children pursuing education. It felt like continuity, not charity. One evening, Brianna texted about dinner plans and joked about Naomi's growing confidence. Naomi smiled, phone in hand, feeling something unfamiliar and welcome: peace. The past would always exist, but it no longer owned her. Ruth had not just given her a home or an inheritance. She had given her a standard for love. Naomi carried that forward, certain now of who she was and whose legacy she honored. In the weeks after the ruling, Naomi experienced a strange quiet she hadn't expected. The crisis was over, but her body still moved as if braced for impact. Mornings felt slower. Nights were calmer, yet heavier in a different way. She returned to Ruth's house often, sorting through boxes not because she had to, but because she finally could. Each object told a story Ruth had lived without complaint. Old rent ledgers written in neat handwriting. Maintenance receipts folded with care. Letters from tenants thanking Ruth for second chances she never spoke about. Naomi understood now that Ruth's wealth had not been accidental. It had been built with discipline and restraint, guided by values Ruth lived by rather than preached. Naomi met regularly with Michael to finalize estate matters, learning the responsibilities she had inherited along with the assets. It wasn't glamorous. It was paperwork, meetings, and decisions with long shadows. Naomi took it seriously. Ruth had trusted her with more than money. She had trusted her with continuity. That realization anchored Naomi more firmly than the verdict ever could. Elaine Monroe became a quiet, unexpected presence during that time. Their lunches were cautious at first, conversations circling neutral ground. Elaine never asked for forgiveness on Lydia's behalf and never defended her choices. She spoke instead about regret, about loving someone you cannot fix, and about the cost of hoping too long. Naomi listened without judgment. Elaine never tried to claim a role she hadn't earned. She never called Naomi her granddaughter unless Naomi invited it. That restraint mattered. Through Elaine, Naomi learned pieces of her history without pressure to accept or reject them. The relationship remained gentle, defined by honesty rather than obligation. Brianna noticed the change in Naomi before Naomi did. "You're lighter," she said one evening over dinner. Naomi thought about it. The anger had faded, not replaced by forgiveness, but by clarity. Lydia had stopped existing at the center of the story. She was now a chapter, not the narrative. Naomi slept better. She laughed more easily. For the first time since Ruth's death, grief softened into memory instead of pain. Work began on formalizing the scholarship Naomi had envisioned during the trial. She named it after Ruth, focusing on students aging out of foster care who wanted stability through education. Naomi funded it carefully, sustainably, refusing to drain resources for appearances. She worked with advisors, reviewed applications herself, and insisted on mentorship support alongside financial aid. It felt like stewardship, not generosity. Ruth would have approved. Naomi also began managing the rental properties personally, meeting tenants face-to-face, listening more than speaking. She learned quickly that wealth without attention rotted fast. Ruth's approach had been simple: fairness, firmness, follow-through. Naomi adopted it fully. When the first scholarship recipient sent a handwritten thank you letter, Naomi cried quietly in Ruth's sunroom. Not from sadness, but from alignment. The legacy wasn't frozen in the past. It was active, growing, responsive. Naomi realized she wasn't just surviving what Lydia had done. She was building something independent of it. Lydia attempted contact once more through an unfamiliar email address. Naomi read it without reacting. The message was brief, defensive, and filled with justification rather than remorse. Naomi deleted it and blocked the address. There was no drama in the choice. Just finality. Michael later confirmed Lydia had begun wage garnishment to satisfy the judgment. Naomi felt no satisfaction in that knowledge. Consequences were not revenge. They were resolution. One evening, Naomi joined Brianna for dinner, meeting colleagues and friends she had avoided during the lawsuit. Life resumed its ordinary rhythms. Conversations shifted from court dates to plans, from fear to possibility. Naomi noticed how often she smiled without effort. When Brianna teased her about a man from Michael's firm who kept asking about her, Naomi didn't deflect. She didn't rush either. She had learned patience from Ruth. Good things lasted when built slowly. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Naomi stood alone in Ruth's sunroom, sunlight warming the floor where decades of decisions had been made. She looked at Ruth's photograph and spoke aloud, thanking her for protection she hadn't understood until now. Naomi finally accepted that love did not require biology to be legitimate. It required presence, consistency, and choice. Ruth had chosen her every day. Lydia had chosen herself. Those truths no longer competed. They simply existed. Naomi felt grounded in a way she never had before. The story of her life was no longer about abandonment or defense. It was about continuity, intention, and agency. Whatever came next would be shaped by decisions Naomi made with open eyes and steady hands. Ruth's legacy lived on, not just in assets or scholarships, but in the woman Naomi had become. As months passed, Naomi settled into a rhythm that felt earned rather than inherited. Managing the properties required difficult decisions: evictions when necessary, repairs when overdue, negotiations that tested her resolve. She learned quickly that compassion without structure created chaos. Ruth had understood that balance, and Naomi practiced it carefully. Tenants began to recognize her presence, not as an absentee owner, but as someone attentive and fair. That reputation mattered. Naomi discovered satisfaction in competence, in knowing that her work produced stability for others as well as herself. She no longer felt the need to justify her success. The lawsuit had stripped away any lingering doubt about whether she deserved what Ruth had left her. Naomi had not taken anything from anyone. She had been entrusted with responsibility and had chosen to honor it. That distinction changed how she moved through the world. Confidence replaced defensiveness. Calm replaced vigilance. Elaine's health began to decline quietly, without drama. Naomi accompanied her to medical appointments when asked, sitting beside her in waiting rooms filled with strangers and shared silence. Elaine never spoke badly about Lydia during those visits. She spoke instead about aging, about mistakes she wished she had interrupted sooner, about the strange peace that comes with acceptance. Naomi listened, absorbing lessons that had nothing to do with inheritance or courtrooms. When Elaine apologized one afternoon for not protecting Naomi sooner, Naomi answered honestly. "You're here now," she said. That was enough. The relationship did not rewrite the past, but it softened its edges. Naomi understood that healing did not require reconciliation with everyone. It required truth, boundaries, and presence where it mattered. One evening, Naomi attended a small dinner hosted by colleagues from the Property Management Association. Conversation flowed easily. No one mentioned lawsuits or family drama. Naomi was introduced simply as herself. Later, as she stepped outside for air, Jordan Reeves joined her. Their conversation was unforced, quiet, and observant. He spoke with respect about Ruth's legacy without romanticizing it. Naomi noticed that. They did not exchange promises or expectations. They exchanged honesty. When Jordan asked if he could see her again, Naomi said yes without hesitation or fear. She recognized the difference between attention and intention now. That awareness felt like another inheritance Ruth had left behind, though never written down. The first annual report from the Ruth Parker Scholarship Fund arrived exactly 1 year after its creation. 3 students had completed their first year of college successfully. Naomi read each update slowly, taking in their words. None of them spoke about money first. They spoke about safety, about being seen, about someone believing they could last. Naomi closed the folder and sat quietly, understanding something with certainty. Ruth's greatest gift had never been wealth. It had been continuity, the refusal to let a child fall through the cracks simply because the world made it easy to look away. Naomi had carried that forward without realizing it until now. The cycle had been broken cleanly, not with anger, but with intention. On an ordinary evening, Naomi locked up the sunroom and turned off the light, leaving Ruth's photograph glowing softly in the hallway. The house no longer felt like a shrine. It felt like a home. Naomi moved forward without urgency, without bitterness, and without the need to prove anything to anyone. Her life was not defined by abandonment, lawsuits, or inheritance. It was defined by choice. Ruth had chosen her. Naomi had chosen to stand firm. And in doing so, she had chosen herself. Naomi met Brianna for dinner at their usual neighborhood spot, the one with uneven tables and a server who already knew their order. They sat by the window as the evening settled outside. "You look different," Brianna said, studying her over a glass of wine. "Not tired. Not braced." Naomi smiled softly. "I think I finally stopped waiting for something bad to happen." Brianna laughed. "That's cold peace. Took you long enough." Naomi stirred her food, thoughtful. "I used to think closure meant answers. Or apologies. Or someone finally admitting they were wrong." Brianna leaned back. "And now?" Naomi met her eyes. "Now I think closure is deciding I don't need any of that." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Brianna grinned. "So, are we talking about Jordan or are you pretending that didn't happen?" Naomi laughed, the sound easy and unguarded. "We're talking. Slowly." "Good," Brianna said. "You deserve slow." Naomi nodded. She knew that now. Not everything meaningful had to arrive in chaos. Some things grew best when given room. Later that night, Naomi returned home and paused in the hallway outside the sunroom. She looked once more at Ruth's photograph and spoke aloud, her voice steady. "I'm okay now." The words felt true. The past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. Lydia's absence no longer defined Naomi's worth. The courtroom battle no longer echoed in her thoughts. What remained was the quiet strength Ruth had modeled every day: show up, do right, protect what matters. Naomi turned off the light and went upstairs, carrying that lesson with her. The story did not end with revenge or triumph. It ended with clarity. Naomi Parker had been chosen once, long ago, by a woman who understood love as action. And now, fully grown and firmly rooted, Naomi chose herself, and the life she would continue to build. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story moved you, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with someone. Stories like this remind us that family is not always who gives us life, but who chooses to stand by us when it matters most. Thank you for spending this time with me. And until the next story, take care of yourself and the people who truly show up for you.